Imagine this. You're a snail. Life is pretty chill. You spend your days slowly, very slowly gliding along, minding your own business, munching on leaves, and avoiding birds. Then one day some fancy French chef plucks you from your peaceful garden existence and voila, you're transformed into a delicacy served to people wearing monocles and sipping wine that costs more than a small car. Welcome to the world of Escargot. Yes, snails, those slimy critters you've probably sidestepped on a rainy day, are an integral part of high-end French cuisine. But don't worry, they're prepared with enough garlic and butter to make even the most skeptical diner ask for seconds. So how do snails go from sliming around the backyard to gracing the plates of fancy restaurants? Let's dive into the history, preparation, and culinary artistry of escargot, with a dash of humor and a sprinkle of garlic butter. Snails, believe it or not, have been on the menu for quite some time. Long before they were the stars of chic Parisian bistros, prehistoric humans were munching on snails, probably thinking, well, why not? Fast forward to the Roman Empire, and the snails had officially upgraded from prehistoric snack to gourmet Roman delicacy. The Romans, who had a flair for excess, have you seen their banquets? Loved these little guys. They even had snail farms called cochlearia, because why settle for foraging when you can have a snail ranch? Feed them wine-soaked grains, let them bulk up, and boom! Dinner is served. It wasn't until centuries later, though, that the French truly claimed escargot as their own. Legend has it that in 1814, the Prince of Talleyrand, who had the kind of name that sounds like he always wore a silk cravat, needed to impress the Russian Tsar, so he called upon his chef to whip up something special. The chef, seeing a few snails loitering around the garden, had an idea. He drowned the snails in garlic butter, herbs, and wine, popped them back in their shells, and served them to the Tsar. The verdict? A resounding chef's kiss. From that moment, escargot secured its place in the culinary halls of fame. So, you've decided you want to try escargot at home, or at least impress your friends at dinner parties by talking about it. But where does one even start with preparing snails? Don't worry, it's not as slimy a process as you might think. Okay, maybe a little slimy, but stay with me. First things first, not all snails are created equal. If you're picturing grabbing any random snail off the sidewalk, let me stop you right there. You'll want the fancy French snails, specifically Helix pomadia or Cornu aspersum. These snails are living the good life, farm-raised for their delicate texture and flavor. It's the snail equivalent of free-range organic chicken, only smaller and slimier. But before these snails can make their debut on your plate, they need a little detox. Snails in the wild have a habit of munching on random stuff like dirt and questionable plants, and trust me, you don't want that on your dinner plate. So they're put on a cleansing diet. Think of it as a snail spa retreat, where instead of kale smoothies, they feast on clean snail-approved food like flour or cornmeal. After a few days, they're feeling light, refreshed, and ready to meet their culinary destiny. Next up is the big boil. The snails are dunked into boiling water for a few minutes, kind of like they're taking a hot tub plunge, but, with fewer happy outcomes. This softens them up and makes it easier to extract them from their shells. Now, if you're squeamish, you might want to delegate this part. But, trust me, it's worth it for what comes next. The buttery, garlicky magic. Let's get real for a second. If someone told you that you'd be eating snails for dinner, you'd probably pull a face. But add enough butter, garlic, parsley, and maybe a splash of white wine, and suddenly the idea of eating snails doesn't seem so bad, right? This is the brilliance of escargot à la bourguignonne, the quintessential escargot dish. Here's how it goes. After the snails have been purged, boiled, and removed from their shells, they're carefully placed back into said shells. Now sparkling clean, of course. Then comes the best part. Each snail is drowned in a glorious mixture of garlic butter, finely chopped parsley, and sometimes a splash of wine. The whole ensemble is baked until the butter is bubbling, the garlic is fragrant, and the snails, well, they're snug in their buttery little beds, waiting to be devoured. Now you might be thinking, but how do I actually eat this fancy snail dish without embarrassing myself? Do you remember that classic scene from Pretty Woman where Julia Roberts' character faces off with escargot and the snail fights back? Fear not, there's an art to it, but it's not as intimidating as it seems. First, you'll be presented with some very specialized tools: escargot tongs and a snail fork. The tongs are used to hold the hot snail shell in place, because no one wants to chase a snail shell across the table, while the tiny fork is used to delicately extract the snail from its shell. It's kind of like playing the world's fanciest claw machine game, but instead of winning a stuffed bear, you win snail. Once you've expertly plucked the snail out of its shell, take a deep breath and go for it. The snail itself is tender, slightly chewy, and mild in flavor. Think mushrooms, but with a bit more bounce. But let's be honest, it's the garlic butter that really steals the show. Pro tip, don't forget to mop up that leftover butter with a hunk of crusty bread. Waste not, want not. Aside from the bragging rights of saying you've eaten snails, there are actually some solid health benefits to diving into a plate of escargot. For starters, they're high in protein and low in fat, making them the perfect snack for anyone trying to convince themselves that indulging in garlic butter is totally healthy. Hey, no judgment here. A typical serving of escargot, about 6 snails, packs in around 14 grams of protein. Not bad for something that fits in the palm of your hand. Just 1 gram of fat, though let's not talk about the butter. A healthy dose of iron, magnesium, and vitamin B12. So next time someone looks at you funny for ordering snails, you can hit them with, actually, it's a superfood. In today's world of conscious eating, even snails are getting their moment in the sustainability spotlight. Snail farming, or heliciculture, is actually pretty eco-friendly. Snails require very little land, food, or water to farm, and they produce minimal waste. Plus, they don't moo, oink, or cluck, making them a quiet addition to any sustainable diet. That said, there's some debate about how humane the whole purging process is, but with the growing trend of ethical snail farming, there's hope for a future where snails live their best lives before they meet their buttery fate. Escargot may have started as a snack for prehistoric humans and Roman emperors, but today it's a symbol of gourmet French cuisine, and a testament to the power of garlic butter to make anything taste good. Whether you're eating snails in a cozy French bistro or whipping them up in your own kitchen, snail tongs in hand, you're partaking in a centuries-old tradition that proves snails are far more than just garden pests. They're tiny, chewy morsels of culinary magic, best enjoyed with a side of humor and a whole lot of butter.